Okay, today we are taking a look at another Raspberry Pi 5 kit. I picked up this additional kit because I want to take an attempt at clustering multiple Raspberry 5s together. I have a little project in mind that we can make use of that for. So this one I picked up from Raztech from a brand Vemico on Amazon.ca. This one cost me $185 for this kit. I haven't opened it yet, so I don't know what it comes with, but this is the box. It looks actually quite nice. So it's from Raztech. It's got an SD card, 64-bit, 4K display. It's pretty much just a Raspberry Pi 5, but this kit comes with some additional things. It comes with a case, a fan, power supply, the Raspberry Pi itself. We can take a look at that here. Okay, so if you want to check out the Facebook or their Instagram, go ahead and scan the QR code there. So we are taking a look at this, and it also comes with a heatsink hat, or a heatsink with a fan on it, that this time the heatsink is not built into the case. It's attached to the top of the Raspberry Pi. So let's take a look at this, open it up. Okay, some really nice packaging here. So we get a Raspberry Pi manual. I don't think I've got a manual in a Raspberry Pi previously before. So that's pretty cool. Guess it shows you how to get it booted up and set it up. We know all that. Okay, so here we go. This one's just some basic instructions. It looks like install the start button, your heatsink information, some plugs, how to get it in and out of the case, a warranty card. Cool, comes with a warranty. So here's the small case. Let's get this out of here and we will take a look. Okay, it looks like a pretty simple case. I don't know if it's just a pull apart. Yeah, it looks like it. Comes with some feet and some screws to hold it in. I believe this just pops apart like this. Snap together case. This is going to be the Raspberry Pi, 8 gigs, same as my other one. So that's going to be a brand new Raspberry Pi. And then in this side, let's take a look at what we get. We get the heatsink with the integrated fan. Let's pull this out of the package here. Okay, nice little fan. Good heatsink. Fan is actually a blower style fan, so we'll be able to, you can't really see it through here, but the fan sucks air in down through here and blows it out this way, I believe. Yeah, so we can see the sides here are all enclosed except for the side that's inside here, so you'll get some good airflow passing across these fins that will help cool off the Raspberry Pi. We get a 64 gig SD card, a SanDisk Ultra. It's going to be the same power supply that we got in the last one, the Raztech. So micro HDMI to regular HDMI out. We get 2 of those because the Raspberry Pi has 2 of them, 2 outputs. This is going to be micro SD card writer and reader. So you can put this card in here, plug it into your computer, and get the Raspberry Pi OS on there and a screwdriver. Okay, so let's get this set up. We'll see how well it performs. We'll check out the heatsink. We'll see what the temperatures are and how well it can keep this cool. The reason I like this one better actually than the previous one, this case here, you can see there's no Raspberry Pi in it right now. I am doing another little project on an extended case with the SSD. So I've printed this case here. So I've just extended this case so that it will hold up, and we have our NVMe drive. You can watch that video somewhere up here in the top corner. You can click on that and watch the video on the SSD speeds that we get with this NVMe. What we're going to do is we're going to test out this case because I actually do like the look of this one too. It's got some good airflow, but the big thing about this is this piece here does not attach to the actual case. It attaches to the Raspberry Pi itself, meaning that we don't have to rely on the case to hold the fan in, which is exactly what we need. Let's get this attached and we will show you how that's done. So it looks like we are mounting to this hole here and this hole here. Not the Raspberry Pi case mounting holes, but these ones here. Okay, so those line up great. And then in this small bag, we get some spring-loaded legs that will help hold down this fan and heat sink with the proper amount of pressure. We don't want to have too much pressure. We don't want to crack or bend the PCB on the Raspberry Pi. That wouldn't be good. So we want these spring-mounted legs with the right amount of tension. And obviously these are going to be our heat sink transfers. So make sure you peel the plastic off these before you put them on, or you won't get good heat conduction. So let's see which ones this recommends putting these silicone heat pads on. It doesn't say here. I believe we could probably just take a guess here by the size of these. I'm gonna say that this is gonna be one of them. Probably this guy here is the other one. And then probably this one down here. Now, I am noticing that these are different thicknesses. I don't know if you can tell, but this one is a little bit thinner than this one. And I'm going to bet that that's because this one's going to go on this here, because that's a little bit shallower in the PCP depth that this is going to mount to. And this one is raised up a little bit more. So we will want to make sure that this thin one goes on here so that this flat surface is balanced. Okay, so let's peel off our plastics on this. We'll get this one mounted squarely on that one. And then this thinner one we will place right there, which fits perfectly. Now, maybe I need to double check, but I didn't see any installation instructions for this. So maybe if you're new to this, you might not have realized that the thicknesses are a little bit different. And you'd end up with a slightly crooked heat sink here. So just push these through these holes. It's going to be quite a tight fit. Make sure we don't break them. Okay, so now we have a spring-loaded. Springs feel pretty good, like they'll hold a pretty good tension on there. So okay, so let's push these through these holes. That's on there. That's on there. On there pretty good, and as far as I can tell, they are just making contact. It's not quite perfectly straight. You can see here it's a little lower on this side than it is on this side, which is still fine. It's not going to bother me. It's going to be in a case, so I won't see it, but we'll have to test it out. And then we can plug in the fan in our regular spot right here. So let's go ahead and pull out that little cover for the fan. Just a little piece of plastic covering it. Yeah, as simple as that. So fan's plugged in. Heatsink is on. And maybe we will do a test comparing the other one, this guy here, and this one came with a fan and copper heat sinks, individual heat sinks instead of a one piece like this one. The copper might perform better. This looks like it's probably just aluminum, but this is a larger area to spread out that heat than individual copper ones. So we'll have to see which one performs better. They might end up being the same. This one might just take longer to get up to a stable temperature, but we'll run some tests and we'll find out. Let's get it in the case. So it looks like we have, the case goes like this. So our inputs are gonna go here. we're gonna get a couple screws and screw that down. Okay, so this power button is actually just gonna drop into the little hole right here. Then we'll put our Raspberry Pi back in the bottom here. Okay, there it is, it's in there, and we'll screw this in here. Okay, not too tight, just when the head of the screw reaches the PCB. Because we are screwing into plastic, we don't want to over tighten these and strip the plastic out. Then we have this side, and it's just a clip in with these small holes, clip into the side here. So slap that guy on. Okay, on there pretty good. And then we have a lid. We can just press our lid on here. And you get some side ventilation there. Okay, so let's get this powered up and installed. We will install it on our 64 gig SanDisk Ultra, and we'll run some CPU tests. We'll get it warm and we'll see how it compares to the previous one. Don't forget, let's add our feet. Small silicone feet, they go in the little. Perfect. The case comes with some mounting holes, so you can attach this to a wall, back of a monitor, maybe 3D print something for a VESA mount, and you can attach this to the back of a monitor. So let's switch over to Raspberry Pi OS and see what the temps are like. Okay, so here we are. We're taking a look at the Raspberry Pi that came with the kit. We removed the heatsink from it so that we can get a test on how it runs performance-wise and temperature-wise while we are running some tests. So the test here is going to be the Raspberry Pi is overclocked. We can see here that we've upped the frequency to 2800 and the GPU to 900. And we've allowed a voltage delta of 40,000. The frequency that comes with this is 2400, so this is a 400 megahertz overclock, and this is a 100 megahertz overclock on the GPU. So we have a 1080p video playing in the background from YouTube, and we can see that the GPU is being used. The more on-screen time it gets, the higher the GPU. So we will put this in the background so it keeps rendering on screen. We have BCM stat here. This is going to monitor the frequency that the chip is running at, as well as the temperature. So let's get that going. So you can see here, min-max frequency, our core clocks, all this information. And here is our core. So it is running at 2711. 900 megahertz core clock, and the temperature is raising pretty quickly over 80, which we don't want. And that is just at a 30% CPU cycle. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a sysbench with this running as well. Okay. And sysbench is just going to run a CPU task and see how long that takes with the CPU. So it ran pretty quickly, 9.9 seconds is our average, and we got 19,665. So that's with the overclock, and it will probably be throttling because we are reaching a maximum temperature of 84 degrees. So let's also run a CPU burn test. So this is going to put the CPU at full load and see how long we can get. If it crashes, it may crash. We'll watch the temperature and see how high it gets before it thermal throttles. We can see up here, when this is red, that means that is thermal throttling. So at 84, 83 degrees, it's going to be modulating the frequency of the CPU between boost and 1500 megahertz. So let's start this and we'll see what we get to temperature wise and throttle wise. So we can see here our CPU has gone up to 100% and our temperature is rising. We're at 87 degrees, and just looking at the Raspberry Pi and touching the CPU just with my finger here, it is quite warm. So we'll run this for a few minutes and see what the maximum temperature is. Then we'll rerun the same tests with the fan and the heatsink on it, and we'll see how that compares. Okay, and it's been about 10 minutes. Looks like we have stabilized at about 85 degrees, and it thermal throttles not too often with the red, but the orange does indicate that a little bit of thermal throttling there. We can see that our frequency has reduced, pretty much become stable at 1500 megahertz or 1.5 gigahertz, and it's staying at 1500 megahertz more often than it's going up to its boost clock of 2800. So let's put on the heatsink on this guy and then run the same test again, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we're back in the case. Let's get this started back up. You can hear the fan going. And then we'll run the same test for the same amount of time, and we'll see if we are thermal throttling and what our temperatures get to. So right off the bat, we can see that our CPU temp is about 40 degrees and the fan is not running at all. So we'll go back to our YouTube video and we'll see what it takes to get this fan started. And our fan is now running with this video playing. And we're up to 48 degrees. So let's get everything set up here and we will see what the test reveals. Okay, so we have our YouTube video playing in the background here. We have our BCM stat, our CPU and GPU usage monitors. So let's get the BCM stat started. Okay, same overclock as before. All we did was add the CPU heatsink and fan. We're gonna run our sysbench. It should be about the same just because previously there wasn't enough heat to make it throttle, but we can see here our temperature is only at 54 degrees, which is great. And we can see that the fan is ramping up a little bit. So let's come back in 8 or 9 more minutes and we'll see where we're at. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes and it looks like we have stabilized at about 72 degrees here, 72, 73, which is much better than without the heatsink. You can see up here in the corner, we are not thermal throttling at all, and we are staying at a consistent 2800 megahertz. And our overclock is doing well. So we could probably overclock this a little bit more and run this test again and still be stable. As long as we stay below, I believe, about 80 degrees, we should be rock solid. So we will run this test once more on the old Raspberry Pi with the copper heat sinks and the fan and see how that performs. And we'll have the conclusion at the end. So let's get that test running and we will show you those results shortly. Okay, and this is our Raspberry Pi with the copper heat sinks on it. Let's get this going. We'll do the sysbench. And then we'll also run the CPU burn. So I can hear the fan ramping up and already it's above the temperature that we are running with the new heatsink and new fan. I believe the fan's a little more powerful in the new one, and obviously the heatsink is much larger, so you're gonna get much better heat dissipation with the larger heatsink. And we can see we're barely a minute in here and we are already hitting throttling. So you can see here up in the corner, 83 degrees, and the red lines indicate throttling along with the green CPU frequency on our BCM stat. So the frequency is throttling down so that the CPU doesn't overheat. It looks like it's pretty minimal throttling only maybe 100 or 150 megahertz. It looks like about 200 megahertz there. And then some core clock speed lowering there as well. So let's see what we stabilize at, if the fan needs to spin faster, if it does or not. And we'll check back in about 10 minutes. Okay, here we are hitting the 5-minute mark, and obviously it looks like it didn't do as well as the new Raspberry Pi with the blower fan and the larger heatsink, but it does do much better than without it. You can see here we're stable at about 84 degrees. We are throttling quite a bit, but the throttle isn't down to 1500 megahertz like it does without the heat sinks and fan. This is only throttling down about 200 megahertz to about 2600, 25, and then once in a while it'll drop down to 1500 for a second and then go back up to the 26, 27. So I'm sure that if we limited this to say 2600 megahertz instead of 2800, it would probably be pretty stable and just sit there at 2600 megahertz at all times. So it looks like 2600 on these very small copper heat sinks with the fan is the limit, is about 2600 megahertz. With the larger heat sink on the new one with the blower fan, it looks like we could probably get to 3000 megahertz or 3 gigahertz. I believe that's probably the limit of overclocking a Raspberry Pi. You might be able to get a little bit higher if you get a good bin on the CPU. So that's it for this video on the new Raspberry Pi from Vemoco and Raztech with the heatsink and fan kit. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.